Hello and welcome back to the Consistory of the Coelc YouTube channel. I'm your host for this video, Reverend Zabel of St. John's Evangelical Lutheran Church located in Dalby, Queensland, Australia. And in this video, we're going to be discussing the final article of the Smalcald articles. This is Article 15 of Part 3 on the topic of human rights. So in this article, Luther is particularly concerned with the papists equating human rights with the sacraments, teaching that certain rites obtain the forgiveness of sins, and that by not doing these rites you were committing a mortal sin. And so Luther condemns the papists for doing so. See, human rights are meant to be implemented for the enhancing of our worship, spiritual life, and devotion to God. Human rights are meant to be supplements to help assist us in our Christian walk. They are not to be seen as replacements for God's word and sacraments. You see, God has instituted several things. He's instituted the gathering of believers in the church in order for us to receive the means of grace. He's instituted the office of the ministry in order to dispense the means of grace. He's instituted the means of grace of word, baptism, absolution, communion, so he can give to us the forgiveness of sins and righteousness. He's instituted for us the reading and hearing of his word so that we can hear God speak to us, and he has instituted prayer so that we may talk back to him. Anything beyond this should be done in service of these things, and anything that distracts from these things is to be thrown out. Thus, Luther condemns the papists for equating these human rights with the sacraments, demanding an absolute obedience. He quotes Matthew 15:9, where Jesus condemns the Pharisees for their vain worship, teaching their human rights as doctrine, and also Titus 1:14, where St. Paul condemns the Judaizers for rejecting the truth of God's word in favor of Jewish ritual. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit unusual here. So Luther, when he then wraps up the Smalcald articles, he has this article on human tradition. Then he has like a conclusion, and in the conclusion he gives a little confession about his stance on the articles, and then after that he also goes into like a bit of a rant about the Catholic practice of baptizing items. Now, because the baptizing of items is also in the category of human traditions, I'm actually going to discuss that now in this video, and I'm going to save Luther's confessional statement for our next video. We're going to wrap up the Smalcald articles with a conclusion. So, Luther, in regards to this papist baptizing of things, he calls it a Guckelsack, which is the German term for like a jester's bag of tricks used to distract people. And here Luther lists a bunch of things. He references the Catholics baptizing church buildings and bells and altars, and then inviting the godparents, those who funded these things, to come and witness the baptisms. And also the Catholics baptizing candles, palms, spices, oats, and cakes. And here Luther is referring to the baptizing of things for feast days. For the Easter Vigil, the Catholics would light a new fire, having extinguished the old fire on either Maundy Thursday or Good Friday. They'd light a new fire at the Easter Vigil on Holy Saturday, and they'd present a new Paschal candle. And the Catholics had this practice of baptizing these things. On Candlemas, they would have the practice of baptizing candles with holy water. Palm Sunday, they would baptize the palms for the use in the procession. On the feast day of the Assumption of Mary, they would baptize herbs, flowers, wheat heads, honey, and grapevines that would be used for decoration in the divine worship. They would also baptize oats for use of the feast of St. Stephen or Martymas, and they'd also baptize unleavened cakes for use for Easter Sunday, for Holy Communion. And the thing is, the issue is not so much with the dedication of these things. If you want to dedicate these things for holy use, you want to have a little ceremony consecrating them for holy use, that's perfectly fine. The issue is with the baptizing. And this stems from the wrong view that Rome has in regards to how baptism works. In Article 5 of the Smalcald Articles, we discussed how Luther said Scotus and those particular scholastics who followed his views attributed too little to the water of baptism, whereas Aquinas and his followers attributed too much to the waters of baptism. So, as Lutherans, we believe that the water is the physical means by which the grace of God is applied to the individual. As Luther says, when the water is applied to the body, God's grace is applied to the soul. Scotus was a sacramental occasionalist. He said that the water was just a mere symbolic ritual, and that when you did the act or the occasion of baptism, God would then give you his grace separate. So kind of something else. So kind of if you do the work of being baptized, God will reward you with grace. Now Aquinas also had a similar view of you being rewarded for doing the act of baptism, but Aquinas had a different explanation of this. Aquinas believed that the sacrament of baptism, that when the word was applied to the water, that there was a change in substance of the water. In the same way that the Catholics teach there's a transubstantiation with Holy Communion, essentially they believe in a transubstantiation of Holy Baptism. That when God's Word is applied to the water, that the water itself is changed. That it becomes this special, magical, holy water. And that water, because it is something special in and of itself, when it is applied to the individual, even if the individual doesn't believe, it still works ex opere operato by the mere act of doing. That's why Catholics believe the sacraments can work even regardless of faith, because the water itself has been changed into something special. And because of that, the Catholics also taught that this special magic water could be used to make other things holy. So they put it on a bell or a building or a palm. That now made that a holy palm, a holy candle. And this is like some sort of wizardry. It takes the water of baptism and turns it into like this magical water that can magically also change the substance of other objects. That candles that have been sprinkled with holy water are now fundamentally changed in their substance to be holy candles. And Lutherans reject this. As Philip Melanchthon said, outside of its usage there is no sacrament. When the word is applied to the water, yes, the water becomes holy in the act of baptism. Outside of that act, the water is just plain water. There is no fundamental change to the substance of the water. Therefore, Luther says we reject this Catholic idea of baptizing objects as a jester's bag of tricks used to distract people. And so Luther says we will do away with such stupid things because they are just distracting people. They are not assisting people in their worship life. They are actually distracting people from the true worship of Christ. And with that, we're going to wrap up our final article in the Smalcald articles. But this will not be our last video on the Smalcald articles. Join me for my next video where I'm just going to give a brief summary and conclusion to the articles. I've been your host, Reverend Jake Zabel. Goodbye and God bless.